contrarian, leave it to contrarian badass Reggie Middleton. He called the housing crash. He called the collapse of Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers and the crisis in the Eurozone banking system.
Reggie Middleton.
I know when to ask you to just give a hearty Jamaican round of applause for our guest presenter who's here, Mr. Reggie Middleton, and invite him to the podium.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I want to tell you a little something about me early on. I have strengths and weaknesses. One of my strengths I talk a lot. Some people consider that a weakness. The weakness I have, I don't consider a weakness, but many others do. I don't follow rules very well. So I can have an itinerary of what I talk about, an outline. I'm not going to stick to it. Okay? I'm told to do X, Y, Z. I don't do PowerPoint presentations. I don't have it. I'm here to have a conversation with you. Okay? Is that all right?
That's great.
Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to tell a story. I will tell a story. I want to tell a story about the origin of wealth and what wealth is. Okay, it's going to sound like it has nothing to do with technology, but I'm going to get to it. Bear with me. Just have some patience. What I need every now and then we take a break, I need you to ask me as many questions as you can. So make sure I'm on the right path. So wealth is something that's been in existence since mankind. Okay, there is an argument whether there's a finite amount of wealth and people just tend to find it, or whether there's an amount of wealth and it increases and decreases depending on economic cycles, whether you burn it, etc. I'm not going to get into that. I just want to walk through where wealth started from, at least to my knowledge, and where it's going. So those who amass large amounts of wealth usually amass it at the expense of somebody else, no matter how far back you go in history. So let's go back to the invention of fire. Okay, when they invented fire, certain individuals were able to create this hot thing, right? It burned villages, it created light at night to allow one group of people to do things that the other groups of people couldn't. So the groups of people who have control of this fire amassed what? Well, okay, I'm going to ask you a lot of trick questions and we have a prize. Hopefully, we have some prizes for everybody who answers it. Okay, so after fire, you had other inventions. You had the wheel, and those who mastered the wheel were able to carry large, heavy objects, distances that others couldn't carry. So some of us are pulling this on our back, while others are pushing it. So when you're able to take a lot of things of value and bring it long distances where everybody else is dragging it, it takes 2 or 3 families to transport a few blocks and rocks. That family or that group, that village that mastered the wheel amassed more wealth. Where they get the wealth from? The expense of the people who didn't have the wheel. Okay, so sooner or later you need to realize that when the new technologies come, the first to master it tend to amass wealth, usually at the expense of those who didn't. So you can fast forward many, many, many years up to other recent inventions. You have railroads, which allow intracontinental transport, where you can bring things of value and weight from one side of the country to another. And those who did that amassed more wealth. Those who controlled the railroads amassed significant wealth. It concentrated. Fast forward, automobiles, right? Those who mastered the production of automobiles amassed wealth, usually at the expense of those who bought those automobiles. Fast forward even further to the recent history, you had the advent of the computer. You have big mainframe computers, the size of a room. You had something called mini computers, but they weren't that many, they were about that big. And then, you know, a few smart guys came up with something called the microcomputer, also called the PC, personal computer. That was a significant, massive shift in power and wealth. But it also enabled individuals to do things that big corporations were unable to do just a little bit earlier. Significant wealth came. We had companies like HP and IBM. Okay. Then the PC had two major components. You had hardware and you had software. But these big, powerful companies like IBM focused only on hardware. And when you're making a lot of money and your pockets are very fat, your cash flow positive, we call it a cash cow, you really don't want to change anything. Because if you change something, it's usually contrary to what made you all the money. So even when you see the simple math equation that says 1 + 1 = 2, they see 1 + 1 = 1.5. It's not because they can't add, it's because they're doing what psychologically benefited them. So this big company, IBM, said, we're going to focus on hardware, we're going to ignore software, give it to somebody. They gave it to a college dropout sophomore named Bill Gates. Biggest mistake of their life. Created the richest man in the world, 23 years running. He has about $89 billion of net worth, and that's after he chopped it in half because he created a foundation, put half his wealth in there. True wealth, roughly about $170-something billion, because a company gave them something that they thought was worthless. Okay, fast forward, this company's in control, fast forward 10, 12 years later, you have this real geeky technology, TCP/IP. Okay, a lot of people, and that's a protocol that drives something called the internet. And the internet started to become popularized about 1993, 1994. For geeks and nerds, for criminals and child porn, it would never catch. Okay, never catch on. Only criminals and nerds use it. That's about 1993 to a few years later, a couple of geeks and nerds discovered Google, Facebook, Amazon. They run the world. Just within 20 years or so, there's not a single person in here that doesn't live their life on the internet. I think. Is anybody who doesn't live their life on the internet? Raise your hand. Okay. The internet created massive wealth, right? Not only for individuals that...
You mentioned that utility contributes to the value of the token, the Bitcoin.
Yes.
Okay. But in terms of its value for somebody who's using it, is the value determined, essentially? For example, for currencies that trade on the international market, we know that demand, supply, and other economic factors will affect the value of a pound against US dollars.
I don't agree with that though, not solely.
In terms of this particular Bitcoin, the token, how was it valued? How does one appreciate the value of the site of one coin?
Okay, let's suppose that you walk through each section where I described it. There's the utility value, the ability for you to send value, data, or information from one entity or person to another. You can send it securely, and you can make sure that it can't be tampered with. So if you need something, if you have something that's very important, and you want a paper trail, a digital paper trail, you want it to be tamper-proof and censure-proof, Bitcoin is invaluable. There's not too many other ways to do it. Okay? If you are a market speculator, like, he was discussing how the value drop, supply and demand dictates day-to-day market transaction value. That's noise to me, what happens every day. That's like if you're born, you live your life, hopefully you live to 100 years old, and does it rain tomorrow afternoon? It's irrelevant in the scheme of things in your 100-year life. You wouldn't even remember if it rained tomorrow afternoon. So your utility value, your market value, you have Metcalfe's law, the network effect. Okay, those are the three determinants. In fiat currencies, I believe there's the myth that market value determines everything, but that's not the case. I had a discussion an interesting discussion at a home last night, and I went through the concept of reserve currency and what makes a reserve currency. The reserve currency is basically defined by the entity with the largest gun. Okay, currently the reserve currency is what? US dollar. Why? US has the largest, most prominent military in the world. Before the US reserve currency was what? The British pound sterling. Why? Who happened to have had the largest standing navy and military at the time? The British. As a matter of fact, you go all the way back to the Roman days when Rome had the reserve currency. Why? They had enough military might to take over a third of the world. So that's not necessarily market forces, that's force, period. Okay? So you probably don't hear a lot of people discuss things the way I do, but I'm sort of like, in your face. But any other questions?
So you're saying that Bitcoin will override all of this? The military forces?
No, not necessarily. Bitcoin is an autonomous system that doesn't rely on other parties to transact. Sometimes you want other parties to come in. For instance, the Jamaica Stock Exchange probably will be a little nervous with a fully autonomous system because there are certain controls you want in place. AML KYC, for instance. You want to create a gateway to identify those actors coming in and out. That's not pure autonomy. But your goal as a for-profit entity with regulators is not to have full autonomy. You know, just like if you get in a car, it's possible to get in a sports car, take all the limiters off, put big tires on a turbocharger, and go 290 miles per hour. But not everybody wants to do that. Certain people would much rather drive safer or with fancier tires, so they have requirements that would entail dialing down the capability of the car and customizing it. You follow me? Okay, regulation is one thing, appealing to a client base is another, appealing to political climate. Some people may say, I want it to act and look like this. So it's customizable. The beauty of it is software. You get it, you do what you want. Bitcoin is open source. You can fork it by pushing a button, download it to your computer, and customize it any way you want. As a matter of fact, I can't think of any financial entity of size that runs pure blockchain-based software on the open internet, except for the platform entities, and those like Bitcoin and Ethereum, etc. And the reason they do that is because a lot of their value is everybody can access it. Okay, the Jamaica Stock Exchange or the New York Stock Exchange or NASDAQ does not necessarily want everybody to access it. They want to be limited to large clients, to AML KYC clients, to other government entities. You know, it's very flexible. That's the magic of it all. It's software. You know, you don't like blue shirts in the software, but you know, blue shirts equals never. Right? And now you have no blue shirts.
Okay.
Yes. Anybody besides the same 2 or 3 people with questions? I'm going to get to you, but anybody else? Okay, go ahead. Do you mind if I keep asking any questions? Yes, you do? No, you don't? Okay, go ahead.
The question I'm trying to get answered in my own mind. Earlier you mentioned that the KYC will apply when the individual wishes to convert their Bitcoin into fiat currency for bearer instruments.
Currently.
So I would like to know if at that point, when for example the person comes to a financial institution, for example, to say that they want to convert their bearer shares, their bearer Bitcoin into fiat currency, what does the institution look to determine the value of one Bitcoin?
They look to the market.
Convert to market.
They look to the bid.
It will be traded on the stock exchange, that would be or...
We're mixing a lot of semantics up. We're talking about Bitcoin, okay, and Bitcoin can be programmed to mimic everything, but pure Bitcoin is itself an asset. It's a commodity, okay? There are very large exchanges that trade $30–40 million a day in volume. Okay, Coinbase is one of the big ones. Okay, Bittrex is probably the biggest right now. A couple of them get hacked and don't have good days. So you look at it. I don't have internet access. You go to Coinbase.com right now, not Coinbase, GDAX.com, and you can look at the bid and ask spread. You can see the volume and activity. Very, very active. Okay, which is just like NASDAQ and the NYSE and the LSE. So you want to know what the current price is? There's a big ask and a midpoint. Okay, and it changes in real time every 1/8 of a second, back and forth. Very active. So it's a very active, relatively liquid market. And so it's very easy to price it that way. Or the real price of something is what someone's willing to pay for it. So if I want to do a very large purchase, most of the big purchases don't go through exchanges, so you don't see the price activity. Those are over the counter. For instance, if I want to do 140,000 Bitcoin transaction. Bitcoin is about $2,500 a coin now. Okay, I can always go through an exchange, but me as a buyer, it wouldn't be in my best interest to go through an exchange because the algorithms will see it and they'll front run me and they'll purposely run the price up. So you want to do an over-the-counter transaction with somebody else, negotiate a price, probably at a premium to spot market, but it's still in my best interest because I'll drive the spot market price up past the premium. That's if I do it one time. Or if I have the time, I'll write an algorithm and hire traders to go in and out the market so I get the entire order done. But that's more like, you know, $40,000 at a time, back and forth. So, and this is no different than any other market. The large stock purchases don't go through the, you know, stock exchanges, at least not on purpose. You know, I've heard sometimes they do negotiated OTC transactions. Same thing with bonds, same thing with, you know, everything else. So it all depends on the individual situation. But quick answer is you have an active market that prices all this stuff in real time. Yes, sir, in the back.
In terms of controls, the government's need to exact taxes on value. How does a governmental body determine that this is a legitimate transaction? If the person opens an account in a different country, lives in a second country, changes it to fiat in a third country, is there any system that would wrestle this thing down so that the control is easy?
Well, is this thing out from the Internal Revenue Code? It's about that thick. And you can find anything you want in all 10,000 pages if you look them up. You don't necessarily have to rewrite, like the tax code has an exit legacy, you know, set of instructions. What it doesn't have is something that recognizes what the blockchain-based tokens can do. For instance, you can take my company's token or even Bitcoin or Ethereum, and you can program it to act as a swap. So you can take Bitcoin, right, and that was our first product actually, and co-program the Bitcoin to act as a total return swap between euros and steel, the price of a steel index. Now, is it priced as a security? Is it priced as a currency, capital gain or loss, income? What the Internal Revenue Service decided to do was to call it one thing, okay? And the CFTC, the Commodities and Futures Exchange Commission, decided to call it another thing, and then the judges decided to call it another thing. Now we have this mishmash of decisions in regulatory circles, and the users who don't want to do anything wrong and want to comply, what do I do? So for taxation is this, for securities regulation is that, for commodities regulation is this, and the judge who's going to put me in jail says it's that. Who do I listen to first? Right, but having to make that decision is a little unclear, so it takes time for the regulatory bodies to congeal. And, you know, they want to. Obviously, if they had a big problem, they simply shut Bitcoin down or attempt to. But, you know, it's obvious that they're actually fostering it. Yes.
But another disruptor is the internet. And I know that the governmental bodies are having difficulties trying to tax transactions on the internet.
35 years after the internet became popularized, so it goes to show you how long it takes.
Right, and you still haven't quite figured it out. So could this be one of those muddy waters that continue into the future?
Well, I don't know. I'm not a regulator or a rule maker, but I think the best way to expedite it is to sit down with guys like me and have a conversation. You know, I was very unhappy with the CFTC ruling using Dodd-Frank, which is very unclear, and I had to put my product in the market simply because there's a potential of it being considered an SEF, swap execution facility. In reality, it's software, right? We don't hold anybody's assets. We don't touch anybody's assets. We don't control it, have the ability to frustrate it. There's no counterparty risk to us. There's no exposure to our balance sheet. There's no difference between us and Microsoft selling server software or Microsoft Office. But the regulators didn't write the regulation with the full understanding of the product. And it's understandable, you know, because they're not experts in it. But the best way to do it is to sit down with domain experts, okay, and have the conversation. Domain experts, it's in their best interest to have regulators understand. There's a small contingent of people in the industry that say we don't want any regulation. Those people are not businessmen, number one, and they're not finance guys. Because if you're a businessman, you got a choice of clarity, right? If you step on that, you get in trouble. If you move this way, we like you. Or ambiguity, where, well, do something and we'll tell you if you're in trouble after the fact, right? Which one would you choose? Clarity every time. So, strong, accurate, fair regulation is the best way to go. It increases the value of the business and increases the value of the underlying. So I'm always open to talk to any regulator. We sit down and have a conversation any day you want. Yes?
Bitcoin is a store of value. You can stay in as long as you like.
Yeah, well, Bitcoin is much more than store of value, but that is one attribute to the currency application, one of the applications on top of the Bitcoin
So you can
blockchain.
stay in as long as you like until you choose to exchange or something like that. Can you say a bit about risk management in terms of identity theft, multiple accounts, and second estate plan in terms of transfer of Bitcoin accounts and different
Okay. Well, Bitcoin happens to be very secure from a security perspective. The Bitcoin blockchain has never been hacked once since origin, not a single time. During that time, JP Morgan gets about 140,000 hack attempts per day, many successes. Every major bank, they've hacked the central banks, they've hacked the Federal Reserve, okay? So it's very secure, but that security is also dependent upon the use and practices of those who use it. So, you know, the technology is so far as rock solid as we've had as could be. Okay, but nothing's unhackable. If you could build it, you could break it, by definition. The fact that it was able to be built means it could be broken. So the security thing is a long definition, a long discussion. You could be using the rock solid Bitcoin blockchain, but you could take your wallet and you could be happy and do a Facebook Live video and say, look at my new Bitcoin. See it? And you show your private key on Facebook Live. Now 40,000 people have your private key. You're probably going to lose that Bitcoin forthwith, right? That has nothing to do with security factors of Bitcoin. It has to do with the fact that you took your password and passed it out to the rest of the world. Okay, so it's a long discussion as to best practices of the end user, the security of the system, what the future lies, way beyond the scope of this conversation. Yes.
You're allowed multiple accounts.
I'm sorry, stay a little louder.
You're allowed multiple wallets in Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's not about allowed. Do get as many as you want. Okay.
So the second part is estate planning in Bitcoin.
Okay, well, there's a lot you can do with estate planning on Bitcoin. That one's a little, if we get to that hole, then I'm not going to get to address everybody else. Okay?
Excuse me, before you, I just want to let this little housekeeping. They have changed the Pegasus Wi-Fi, so some of you may not have been able to access it. The username and password is Geddes, Geddes, lowercase. Okay, so sorry to interrupt. And you're supposed to be serving breakfast shortly.
Geddes, as in Jennifer Geddes, right?
Yes.
So how am I doing so far?
Sure.
Okay. So, any other questions? Or should I move on?
Yes.
Okay. Yes.
Tell us again.
Yes, that's why I classify all tokens as digital assets, because they can be programmed to be other things. At the end of the day, they're assets, just like any other asset. Right, just like any other asset. Exactly. Right. Yeah. You get the prize for the best question because you agree with me.
Really?
Okay, so moving forward, I can discuss more about what my company does. How long before? Are we ready soon?
Yes, another 5 minutes.
Another 5 minutes. Okay.
10:30, right?
So my company is one part consultant, one part software developer, one part financial advisory. Basically, we are the Goldman Sachs of the blockchain. But remember, the goal is to disintermediate. See, Goldman Sachs makes a lot of their money by charging people to do things that they potentially do themselves. That doesn't mean that banks will go out of business. That means that banks have to transform. When I say banks, I mean investment banks. There's a lot of different types of banking, but I'm discussing Goldman. They have to transform their business model, okay? Just like Microsoft transformed their business model. Microsoft is a perfect example of a company that was born in a paradigm shift, right? Faced potential extinction and became stronger. As a matter of fact, they had to be put down by the government. Simply